Whenever you meet someone who is not strayed that much by fads, they're not strayed that much by any one thing. It's like if a wave hits them from the right, they still stay the course. If a wave hits them from the left, they still stay the course.
But emotionally immature individuals, they are always so reactive and they will go through those swings so much. And what they're not doing is leading through a thoughtful response. They don't give a rat's ass about how their emotional reactivity impacts you.
Conscious couples, business partners, and individuals, welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and relationship expertise to help you consistently cultivate the most magnificent relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges. We'll help you have the courage to be your authentic self, communicate effectively, and constructively resolve conflict.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching, speaking, podcasting, and hosting live events with conscious couples all over the world, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. Today we have episode 218. Are you taking on responsibility that isn't yours? Potentially. Before we jump into this episode, as always, I want to remind everyone why we're here. Let's ground in why we're here. You are here for one reason and one reason only, as am I, as is Emilia, to improve our intimate relationship from the inside out. Let's do that today. Putting in the work. Sweetheart, ladies first, what is your intention for today's episode?
My intention for our listeners is to help them understand a lot of the emotional labor, emotional responsibility that they likely have weighing them down, preventing them from maybe doing certain things or feeling certain things. How much of that is actually not their responsibility to carry.
So you recommended a book to me a while back. I have not finished yet. It is by Dr. Lindsay Gibson, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Yes.
Got it. So I asked you when we were preparing for this episode, what was your biggest takeaway from that book? And I think that's a great place to start.
So the biggest takeaway from my perspective on this book, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, was how the adults that we were told when we were younger and in teenage years and as young adults ourselves, the adults that we thought were quote unquote adults, have it all figured out, are actually not really adulty at all.
Okay, so everyone go back to when you were a kid. I'm going to use me as an example, lead by example here, but I want you thinking of you. I remember I did the traditional path, so I did preschool, kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and corporate. And I remember in middle school, I thought adults had things figured out. I remember in high school thinking my teachers knew better than I did. My guidance counselor knew better than I did. I'm 37 now, and I have a very, very strong memory. And I have since rewatched the movie of my life, and it is alarming how little these adults really did know. And I do think my guidance counselor misguided me. That is my truth.
The irony.
Yeah, the irony. So when I was a kid, I thought my mom and my stepdad knew better than I did.
Yeah.
And I do not believe that at all anymore. Turns out they knew very little. Mom, if you're watching or listening, I love you. And yeah, I mean, when you're a kid, you think that your parents know, and you think they have more knowledge and expertise than you do.
Yeah.
And it's not until you grow up and become an adult yourself and you go, okay, I'm 37. I remember when they were 37. Oh, when they were 37, they did not read books.
Yeah,
they were not.
World.
Yeah, it was a different world. So that's what we're going to talk about today is if you had emotionally immature parents, and I am going to say that the Generation X, statistically speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, tends to struggle with vulnerability and emotional intelligence. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. And millennials are getting better at that, even though we also struggle. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because I know we have a lot of millennials out there listening and maybe born in the 80s or early 90s, like Emilia and myself, and you realize after studying things like Dr. Lindsay Gibson that, oh, my parents never in a million years picked up this book, and I wish so deeply that they had. So what is your biggest takeaway? Obviously, adults are not necessarily emotionally mature. Age does not mean maturity.
It doesn't. And that's when you said, when you were talking about how I thought they knew a lot. It's not enough just to know a lot. It's so important as an adult to develop emotionally and through maturity. And so the 3 signs that if you're listening to this episode and you're asking yourself, okay, how does this relate to responsibility taking? It's a direct correlation to how much you will take responsibility for things, because people who have low levels of maturity, specifically emotionally mature, they're emotionally immature, they lack the ability and the capacity, per the development, to take responsibility. So what does that end up? You end up with high levels of, number 1, empathy. So anyone, if you are feeling, yes, that is me, I am incredibly empathetic to other people.
Well, real quick, let's step back for a second and help our listeners identify if they did have emotionally immature parents.
Okay.
What are some signs that, if someone's out there watching or listening, a conscious couple or a conscious single, how do they know if their parents were in fact emotionally immature?
The 3 signs that I was just going to give are the equal opposite of what.
Which is why I wanted to step back.
Yeah. So the first one is low empathy. So the great example of this is when something happens to you, be it you fall and scrape your knee, or someone makes fun of you at school, in something that emotionally hurt or physically hurt, there's a, don't worry about it. There's a dismissiveness to it, rub some dirt in it and move on kind of sentiment. In other words, low empathy. So if you have an emotionally immature parent, they have low levels of empathy. They're encouraging you to just move forward.
Yeah, but nobody identifies as having low empathy. So everyone thinks they have high empathy. And it's like, how does our listener know if their parents are emotionally immature? Like, I know the rubs from dirt in it.
Dismissiveness.
Yeah, but what does that look like?
It is not being able to hang in that moment with you in hurt, sad, disappointment, betrayals. They don't know how to hold that space. In other words, low vulnerability is a component of that.
Low vulnerability. Okay, so...
Or asking questions about what happened there. Like, how do you feel? Like, that's not ever on the table.
Okay. Another good one would be, correct me if I'm wrong, you've never seen your parents cry. That's usually a sign that there's a lack of emotional maturity.
Yeah.
Because crying in front of others, true or false, is a sign of emotional maturity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep. Yeah. The second thing is if you had an emotionally immature parent, then what you experienced was a ton of highs and lows. So a lot of emotional instability. There's no awareness of how their emotions are impacting you as a child or as a person. So they could be extremely stressed out, slamming doors, upset, throwing things around, being a tornado throughout your household, and don't have any regard for how that might impact you and what that might do inside of you. Whether that scares you, whether you start to internalize the stress or frustration or anger or whatever, and there's no conscientiousness of how their behavior and their emotional swings and ups and downs are impacting you.
So think of a movie that other people might know. Who's a character who best emphasizes emotional immaturity?
Disney characters?
No, not necessarily. Any character in any film.
Gaston came up quickly, which was funny.
Yeah, okay, Gaston. That's a good one.
Because he has high levels of egocentrism, like everything's about him.
Yeah.
And that's a really good indicator of
When I was a lad, I ate 4 dozen eggs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much any parent in the Disney films actually are really showcasing of emotional immaturity.
Which makes sense, which is why the hero of the story or heroine of the story has to embark. So in The
have to
Little
take on
Mermaid,
all this responsibility.
the father, they take it. Okay. So number one, vulnerability, lack of empathy. The other one, correct me if I'm wrong, lack of ownership.
Yeah. Just so much defensiveness. Like if you try to bring something up or share something, there's no ownership and there's immediate defensiveness. There's a reason why that points everywhere else but here.
Okay. So the emotionally immature parents cannot look in the mirror and go, wow, I fucked that up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And to that end, one extension of that, emotionally immature parents never actually are willing to take feedback from their children because there's an inherent power dynamic. Someone that's emotionally mature, regardless of if you have kids or not, they're willing to learn from their kids.
Yep.
And so if you have an emotionally immature parent, they're never asking you questions about your life in the way that they genuinely and sincerely embody the respect for you as an autonomous soul.
Yeah.
That can bring value into the world, that can educate them, that have awarenesses outside of them. And so emotionally immature parents are really good at never asking you about yourself, what's going on in your life, and specifically getting curious with that genuine respect at the center point of it.
And if they do ask you about your life, they're not actually curious. They're just trying to have surface level conversations to check the box.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a
called intellectual empathy.
All right. So I had a podcast I was on recently with a man named Art. And Art was 57, 58. And I thanked him at the end of the interview because while I'm a 37-year-old man, I said, I really appreciate how much you actually respect and were asking questions from sincere curiosity instead of this ego. It's well, I'm 57, so I must know more than you. That very well might not be the case at all, actually. And I said, thank you so much for treating us as equals on this show. A lot of men who are older have trouble doing that because they must know more because they've been on this planet longer, when in reality, not even close. So there's another part there. That's the autonomy thing. That's the, if we are emotionally mature, just because you're 31 and I'm 37 doesn't mean I inherently know more than you,
right,
or that I can't learn from you.
Right.
And when we have children, I'm going to learn a lot from my children, and I plan on that, and that takes emotional maturity. So,
right.
Okay, so you just gave signs of emotional immaturity. Can we talk about signs of emotional maturity?
Absolutely.
That are very tangible.
Yes, and before I do, I just want to give one more. The high reactivity. So I mentioned the highs and lows, but it's how quick are they reactive. So we talked about the defensiveness and the not willing to take ownership, but emotionally immature individuals, parents are not. They are always so reactive and they will go through those swings so much. And what they're not doing is leading through a thoughtful response.
Yeah.
They don't give a rat's ass about how their emotional reactivity impacts you. And I kind of touched upon that, but I just want to go a little bit deeper in that because ultimately there's no ability to be emotionally regulated to be able to have a thoughtful response for you. So the signs that you might be taking on more responsibilities that isn't yours is the direct impact of you experiencing the high emotional reactivity with a lack of a thoughtful response.
And a lack of personal responsibility. Because if you grew up with parents who don't take responsibility, you inherently took that on because someone has to.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're used to that, and that's probably manifesting in your relationship to some extent.
It absolutely
And
will.
it did manifest in our past relationships where we were taking 100% of the responsibility in our past relationships, and now we both are fighting for 100%, which is working out really well because when both people take 100% responsibility, you end up creating something magnificent versus 100-0 or 80-20 or whatever. I want to make this as clear as possible for the listeners. Can we talk about the indicators of emotional immaturity before we go into the responsibility piece? I think that's too big of a bridge. I just want to talk about signs of emotional maturity now.
Yeah.
So we talked about the signs of emotional immaturity. Let's talk about the signs and the indicators of emotional maturity.
Okay, the signs and indicators of emotional maturity. The first thing that I go to is the ability to regulate yourself.
Can you think of someone who is don't think of me, not that you were gonna, but I want you to think of the most emotionally mature human being you've ever met, other than you or me. Don't put us in this. And talk about that person, about what are the indicators that they are emotionally mature.
Okay. this person who is emotionally mature has the ability to, despite what is happening inside of her, meaning all the emotions she is feeling at once, she's able to recognize those, not bypass those emotions, but she's able to regulate and hold a steady, calm, thoughtful response to the people that she engages with around her, because she loves and cares about them, and she knows what it feels like to just be reactive in all of the emotions. And so she is regulated amongst the storms of emotions that she's experiencing.
Okay, another way to phrase this might be, she is calm amongst the storm, and she is not. One thing I've noticed about emotional immaturity is people are always distracted.
Yeah.
They have to be distracted. They have to point and talk about other things, persons, places, things. They can't sit in silence and just contemplate and be in the contemplation of what may or may not be going wrong in life. It's almost like they have to distract away from any indicator that life isn't perfect, right? Or they have to shop, or they have to go online, or they have to be on Facebook, did you hear about, or they have to listen to some yak radio.
They welcome in the distractions.
Yes.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that, because her ability to maintain that regulation is of utmost importance to her. She's actually a client, and
nice.
This is her.
I think I know who you're
on
talking
court.
about. Does it begin with an A? Nice, of course. What a coincidence! One of our favorite human beings. Shout out to you if you know who we're talking about. Holy crap! I didn't even know you were talking about her, but I figured you were, because I agree. And what a pleasure to work with this woman.
I know, she's a wonderful.
I think emotionally immature people are hard for me to work with.
They're my least favorite people.
Yeah, it's
when it comes to having a thoughtful, intentional relationship, because you literally cannot have a equal relationship in any regard with someone who is emotionally immature, because inherently you're kind of pushed into this, I need to take more responsibility on if I want to have this relationship. And this is something she struggled with very much. So,
okay, what are some other indicators?
Another indicator is what I was just kind of closing out saying is, it is the utmost importance for her to maintain that ability to regulate, because she knows how important that is for her own peace of mind and operating within integrity of her values, her core beliefs, and her core aspirations, and that's her compass.
So what does that look like, though? I want to make this as tangible as we can. What does that look like? So if I were to walk through with a camera on this woman throughout the day, give me a couple examples
I have a great example
that someone could actually see and witness.
So she has a couple of kids, and there was one time where one of her sons had said, I'm going to be at this person's house, a bonfire or whatever, and I'll be back tonight and I'll let you know. And it was like 9:00, and she's like, I don't think he's home yet. And she was like, that's interesting. And she goes and they share locations, because that's been mutually consentful, not her forcing that. And she's like, okay, he's in the location, which means he's not coming home, which means like they're probably drinking, and like he knows how I feel about that. We've had adult conversations about that. And I obviously am upset at the fact that he didn't communicate, but like, Emilia, like, I want you to know, like, I just woosad myself, and I then just let him know, like, hey, I'm here if you ever need me. I'm willing to come pick you up. So, like, in real time, what you would see is her being like, okay, logging data from a rational standpoint, not what other parents would do in that situation, which would maybe throw their phone, be like, or call right up their child and be like, what the hell,
or call
you lied
the
to me,
cops,
whatever.
or
like,
whatever.
All these things. That's, again, emotional reactivity, as opposed to what you would see observing that is like her going, and like in a joking manner, but truly you would see that for her, because she knows the power of her breath. And in order to maintain that regulation, in order to honor connection over emotional reactivity.
Yeah.
And that connection with her son is most important than how she's feeling and the emotions that are coming up and down in that moment. So what you would see on the day-to-day, some of her practices, she is journaling actively whenever she does have a really big or multitude of emotions. She's aware of that, so she's journaling down or penciling in her phone.
One came up for me too. I'm sorry to interrupt
Please.
you, but this needs to be said, I think. Whenever you meet someone who is not strayed that much by fads, they're not strayed that much by any one thing. It's like if a wave hits them from the right, they still stay the course. If a wave hits them from the left, they still stay the course. And again, to make this tangible, Let me get an example of this. When certain trends or certain fads, I'm going to use this example. When Clubhouse was big, I told Kevin, brother, this is a fad. We're staying our course. Someone who's conscientious and goal-oriented and emotionally mature doesn't just drift with whatever tide of what fad is happening. Oh, did you hear this and that and politics and all? They are very steadfast. They're very stoic. There's no huge high, crazy highs, and there's no like hissy fits and super, super low lows. They're much more regulated in. They don't get wildly freak out when a new movie's coming out, but they also don't freak out when the movie doesn't come out.
Yeah.
And they handle disappointment well. And again, it's hard to tangibilize this stuff.
Well, I'm actually really glad that you brought that up, because when we talk about emotional immaturity, usually the adult child of an emotionally immature parent ends up they swing the pendulum so much that they're so steadfast. But why they're doing that is because they're fearful of ever having the high and lows. So the stoicism becomes like this like pride and honor, which I went through at one point, and I've learned a lot through stoicism. But if you just go through and keep stoic and maintain the course, and you never develop the skills of sharing intimacy and emotional intimacy, and you maybe take overly responsibility of the anchor, being the emotional anchor of the relationships, that's a sign that you are taking on more responsibility in your relationships, because you are swinging on the total opposite end, that I have to be there for everyone. I'm everyone's anchor. I'm all this. And it becomes the avoidance of emotional intimacy.
So then what's optimal? Because on one end, you are the emotional train wreck.
Yeah.
And you're emotionally mature and you need to grow up.
Yeah.
And on the other end, you're so emotionally mature that you don't feel any joy, right? And you always are regulated and centered no matter what happens, and you can't get too excited about anything.
And someone who's deeply emotionally feeling is probably not knowing what you think, what you feel, and what the emotions are that you experience. So you never have that emotional intimacy, because if you do, like, that's really scary.
Well, so how does someone get to 5?
So 5 is recognizing low empathy versus high empathy. Boundaried empathy is 5.
Okay.
Number 2, emotional instability versus emotional anchoring. Okay. The middle is emotional stability with boundaries.
And regulation.
Exactly.
Yep.
Number 3 is the tendency to become overwhelmed and reactive with your feelings without any thoughtful approach. Mm-hmm. The other end of that spectrum is overly thoughtful, analyzing every single detail, and thereby
never
ultimately
taking action.
Avoiding
action.
Emotional intimacy, action, etc.
Yep.
And so the 5 of that is recognizing you can't avoid and you can't hyperfixate. You need to be able to be in a thoughtful response, honoring your feelings and your emotions, not taking on the responsibility of the people around you, and not being able to discern what is my emotions, what is that person's emotions, and putting both on the table so that they're not on your back.
Okay, last piece, we'll get out of here. I'm going to do an exercise with you and I live where I think of someone anonymously who is wildly emotionally immature.
Okay.
And I'm just going to give 3 bullet points of character traits that indicate that. What I really think of her or him, okay? In this case, it's a her.
Okay.
And you're going to do the same thing anonymously, and we're going to do both with both, okay? So I'm going to go emotionally immature first, all right? And I'm going to say 3 bullet points that I really believe are true, and I want everyone to see if you have any of these or anyone you love has these, okay? Number 1, bullet point number 1, this is an emotionally immature human being. She throws hissy fits whenever something doesn't go her way. Mm-hmm. Number 2 is she can't handle disappointment at fucking all. Mm-hmm. Like, does not handle disappointment, gets devastated with every time something doesn't go the way she expected or hoped. Yeah. And then the 3rd one would be cannot take a lick of ownership because deep down she doesn't believe in herself and she doesn't believe she can change anyway, so she just is super defensive. Mm-hmm. All right, now I'm going to do emotionally mature, different person.
Can I add one bullet point, because this is something most people will feel too?
Well, I want you to do yours. You're going to do this right after me.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's someone who is extremely emotionally mature. Okay, bullet point number 1. I have never seen her lose her cool I've never seen her lose her cool. She has the best self-regulation skills I've ever witnessed. Number 2, she is extremely goal-oriented and is always trying to find the win-win-win scenario amongst the chaos of life. And she has to do that with thoughtful conscientiousness and not reactivity. Number 3, she is hyper-conscious and acutely aware of her impact on others, almost to the point where it's like, babe, get rattled. I'm talking about you. It's like, tell her what you really think. She's disrespecting you. No, but I'm talking about you. And I just wanted everyone, I didn't plan on saying that, but I want everyone to know you've worked on this. You've studied this.
Yeah, this is a skill that can be developed, and I'm not taking on more responsibility than is mine in our relationship. And if I do, it's a conscious conversation that you and I have. And if I do, I know where my boundaries and where my limits are. And then eventually we put it back on the table and have a discussion on how we can have an equitable relationship that doesn't carry, like, I'm not carrying all of the emotions in our relationship. And you've been extremely proactive. Babe, you have been the most emotionally mature male I've ever been with. So it's wild to be able to share in this conversation, because I know men, and I will go through mine.
Anonymously.
I know men who will...
This is emotionally immature?
Yeah, emotionally immature. Has no idea how to express their feelings.
I want you to think of an actual man.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, okay,
I am.
good. Yeah.
Has no idea how to actually sit with me in a tough conversation. Has no idea how to validate emotions. Has no capacity to, when I express something that has a degree of emotion that's not fine, positive, or okay, everything's great, unable and no capacity to say something along the lines of, how did that impact you? Where did that come from? What are your thoughts around that? I'm really sorry that happened. That must feel XYZ. No capacity. Okay. Second one, someone who is emotionally immature, the same person that I'm thinking about, the emotional instability translates into buyer behavior, meaning when feeling something that's unpleasant always results in a purchase. Buying something that is a stupid decision of how they're spending their capital, and ultimately is not a good choice for them, and ends up becoming something that
they're dealing with their emotions with something
purchasing,
external purchasing,
trying to relieve that, but ultimately doesn't end up relieving that.
Which, by the way, is another sign of emotional immaturity, which is drugs, alcohol, vices, shopping, addictions, all these things to cope with emotions rather than actually learn how to deal with them.
Exactly. Yep. And then the third component is ultimately, I think, therefore I am, meaning not in the way in which the actual Stoics think. It's more so, I feel, therefore I am. I feel like bad about myself, therefore the situation is bad. I feel like that person's nice, therefore they're a great person. And what I'm describing is this person experiences what's called affective realism. Because they feel that way, it must be true. And for someone who is emotionally mature,
there's a disconnect between reality and how you feel.
Exactly.
And you can contemplate that.
Exactly. So the narrative, it always changes.
The narrative is not reality.
It's not rooted in any reality.
The narrative is to cope with emotions.
Exactly.
Okay, so now talk about someone who is deeply emotionally mature, and I actually don't want you to use me. Not that you were gonna, but I realized, cute. Yeah. So I use you because you are the most emotionally mature person I've ever personally met.
Thank you.
And I wanted to use you because even if I was going to keep that anonymous, I want everyone out there watching or listening to be able to identify someone like that.
Right.
Because the person who is the most emotionally mature is usually the unsung hero of all endeavors. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I want to make sure that that's not the case with you, so I wanted to celebrate you a bit. But I really do want you to think of someone outside of us who you genuinely, sincerely believe is wildly emotionally mature, and describe 3 quick bullet points about him or her.
Okay, so this person, they are extremely emotionally mature.
Emotionally mature?
Yeah, mature, right? That's what I'm doing. Yeah. Okay.
Immature and mature sound very similar when you
Right.
when you say emotionally in front of it.
Emotionally mature.
Yeah.
This person is very mindful of how, when they feel their emotions, if that externalizes to their partner at all, what the impact is. So that person is very conscientious about what they're saying to their partner, how they're saying it, the tone of voice that they're saying it with, and how it might come off to their partner. And they don't want to hurt their partner. So they're mindful of how what they feel, if externalized, impacts a partner. Okay, number 1. Number 2, they are focused on developing habits and systems and skills that ground themselves in rational thinking, not to bypass their emotions, because they recognize their emotions are really important and are signals, but to ultimately offset the emotional reactivity that is very much available to this person as a human. And as a result, all of those systems and habits and ways of thinking help this person, to navigate their life in a way that is mature in comparison to all their peers.
You're not using me, are you?
I'm not.
Okay.
No.
Good. Okay.
And then number 3, the third one, although
I need to meet this man.
although this man is very mindful and takes a thoughtful approach, this person has worked on his own avoidance of all of the emotions that are in other relationships, and has worked on this concept exactly of not taking on more than he needs to, more responsibility for the lack of emotional maturity in his family, more for the lack of emotional maturity in his relationship. And he has had to try to navigate that line with vulnerable, courageous communication.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
As he brings emotional maturity into the people that he loves and cares about.
Very nice. Very, very nice. I think begin with a B.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Cute. Okay, so to wrap this up, if you're out there, if nothing else comes of this episode, identify your level of emotional maturity, whether or not your parents were emotionally mature, and same with your partner. And then how does this tie to responsibility? If you, like Emilia and I, had some emotional immaturity in your upbringing, you probably take on more responsibility than what is optimal in your relationship, like we used to do.
A great example of this is every household has a ton of different tasks in order to keep the order and maintain the routines. For example, dishes, laundry, things like that nature. When you have someone that is incapable of being mature, or has moments where they're coming home from work and they're stressed, to lighten the load or take off their load, you might go into taking up the laundry, taking up the dishes, doing things that are proactive, quote unquote, ways in order to lighten their experience so that you're not experiencing the reactivity.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's where that translates into cognitive labor, physical labor, emotional labor, and that's where that connects to responsibility. Because if you're stressed out, if you're feeling burnt out, if you feel overwhelmed, likely it ties back to exactly what we're talking about.
Okay. Beautifully said. Is there anything you want to add before we go? We do have to get out of here.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. I know we have an event coming up, so.
Yes, the top 3 things women struggle with in their relationship. There are 3 critical zones that we're going to be focusing in on this relationship. And we also have determined that we are going to be sharing the film Mrs. Doubtfire in that, to be able to share some of the challenges that we continuously see with women as they struggle in their relationship. And this is for men and women, because these are the cheat codes that will help your relationship stop the struggle so that you guys can work better as a team.
Speaking of which, when we watched Mrs. Doubtfire, it's from 1993, so it's way back. The villain in the film is actually the woman who is taking on all of the responsibility. And it's so interesting how she was villainized in the film. So this is going to be a really good study and fascination, especially from the frame of emotional maturity and emotional immaturity. Because I think sometimes emotional immaturity is actually celebrated in movies like this. And it's actually funny, but not necessarily good or optimal. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. We will see you again next week. And as always, it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please check the show notes to connect with us and say hello on social media.
If you and your partner resonated with this episode, please leave us a 5-star review at the link in the show notes and share this with someone you love. Until next time, it's not about you or me, it's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.